I gotta try this.
Yeah.
There's quite a few I've gotta try it with this year.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna start now. We're actually live on Facebook, just so you know.
Sorry, it's
This-
on YouTube.
Sorry, live on YouTube.
Am I taking?
I'm gonna be talking loudly into this area here, so if I don't make a lot of eye contact, that's why, so everybody can hear us on YouTube. But if you can all leave your questions until the end, this is a fairly long presentation, and we do need to make sure we're on time for the next one. So I'm going to be talking to you about how to influence fertility and sex ratios in birds, and that is the proportion of male versus female chicks that you hatch out. So first I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Andrea Cabibi, and I have been working in the zoo world for over 35 years as a manager and also as a veterinary technician. I've worked with over 400 different species of birds and animals, most of them highly endangered, and I am the former animal care manager of the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, where I was responsible for over 1,500 birds and 30 employees. So let's have a look first at fertility of birds. And these are some of the factors that actually affect fertility, and we're going to be looking at these individually. Now, one of the things I tried to do with this presentation is combine science with what I call tribal knowledge. And that is the experience that the bird breeders have and the knowledge that they have that has not been proved by science, because science costs a lot of money, and unless it's related to the chicken industry, the money is not there to do the studies that need to prove what is out there. But that doesn't mean, because the science hasn't been done, that the tribal knowledge is not very important. So let's have a look first at how diet affects fertility. There is an increase in protein needs to be made in order for egg production and chick rearing. And this has to occur by feeding a richer, more heavily protein diet to the hens and the males to bring them into breeding condition. This actually works as a stimulant to bring the birds into condition. Now, one of the things that's important is, depending on whether the birds come from a tropical, a temperate, or a polar area, depends on how much food abundance and increased protein and food quality affects their ability to come into breeding condition. And the reason for this is the tropical species do not get the diet changes and climate changes that the temperate or polar birds do. So know where your birds come from in order to know how to influence breeding condition in them. So very briefly, these are some of the most important vitamins that affect fertility. Let's have a look at calcium, and that should say vitamin D. It says vitamin D. Calcium, as most of us know, is necessary for bone growth of chicks and for producing eggshells by the hen. What a lot of people don't realize is calcium is also needed for muscle contractions. What muscle contractions are most important at breeding time? The laying of the egg. So if you have a lot of hens that are getting egg bound, one of the first things you should do is look at how much calcium is in your diet and whether you're not giving enough. Second thing is vitamin D. Vitamin D is important. It's a catalyst for calcium. Without vitamin D, calcium can't be used by the body, so you need to have both working together. I highly recommend one of these products. Is Calcium Plus. You can either add it to the water or it comes in a powder form, and this provides not only calcium and vitamin D balance for birds, but also provides magnesium. So it is an important addition to the diet in order for your birds to successfully lay eggs and produce eggs themselves. The other important one is vitamin E and amino acids. A lot of people know vitamin E improves fertility, but what does it actually do? What it actually does is it protects the quality of the male sperm and the egg quality and the reproductive tract of the females. So it actually protects the membrane surrounding the sperm and the reproductive tract. Vitamin E also plays an important role in transporting amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks for protein. So in the previous slide, I said protein, increase in protein is important. In order for your birds to use that protein, they need the amino acids. The amino acids need the vitamin E to be able to use properly. So all these things are interconnected in providing a balanced diet at breeding time. Now, one of the products I highly recommend, Viagra. And the reason for this, it not only has the vitamin E, which a lot of products do, but it also, which not many products do, it has the amino acids, and the two work together. So let's look at the harmful vitamins and minerals. One of the things that can cause infertility in birds is too much zinc. Too much zinc is produced by too much of these foods. Now, let's look at peanuts, almonds, and cashews. Our parrots love the nuts, particularly the peanuts. Have a look at your diet. If you're having fertility issues with your citizens or parrots, have a look at your diet. See if maybe you've got too much zinc in your diet. Aflatoxins, this is a lot in the media lately. This is a mold or a contamination of grain foods that's not occurring in your bird room or in the supermarket. It actually occurs in the fields where the farmers are growing the crops. It's fairly new. It's shown to cause infertility in people and in birds. When you see these black marks on the produce that you're feeding to your birds, you should make sure you don't have that. That could be aflatoxins. There is no real treatment for it except to detoxify the bird system. And again, here we got a couple of products that are really good at getting the aflatoxins out of the bird system. One is called milk thistle and dandelion, and the other is a system detox. These are natural remedies, but they do detoxify the aflatoxins. So again, you're looking for reasons why your birds aren't breeding properly. This could be one of them. You may want to try these products and see if you get an improvement in fertility. So let's look at pellet versus seed. I come from the zoo world. Zoo world loves pellets. Why do we love pellets? Because they provide complete nutrition with every bite. There's no picking through and deciding they're going to eat their favorites. They actually get complete nutrition. All my birds are on pellet. They don't eat seed at all. They get fresh fruit and vegetables, but my birds eat pellet. My tortoises also eat pellet. And one of the things that I think we should keep in mind, you saw in the previous few slides how interconnected everything is. Amino acids and protein and calcium and vitamin D and vitamin E. We're not nutritionalists. The pellets that are produced are put together by nutritionalists, and most of them have PhDs. That means 8 years of university education to learn how to formulate these diets. We go home, we throw in a bit of this, a bit of that, and it's basically a whole hodgepodge of stuff, and the birds pick out what they like and leave what they don't. It's not really a balanced diet. It's very hard to balance a diet that way. One of the reasons I do feed pellet. I also show my birds, and the judges say my birds have excellent feather quality. You can really see a shine on them. Now, there's many different types of pellets out there. My personal favorite, no, I don't work for Missouri. My personal favorite is actually Missouri, and this is one of the reasons. Zupreme produces a pellet that has many different colors in there. It's very visually interesting for us, but I found my birds would decide that they each liked a different color, and they throw everything out, and they'd only eat the yellow ones, or another bird would eat the green ones, and it would be very wasteful. They wouldn't eat a particular color of pellet. I'd have to be trying to figure out who liked the green ones and who liked the yellow ones so I could switch the dishes. This is a uniform brown color. It's all the same. They can't pick through it and decide they like a particular color. Keep in mind, most of our canaries eat canary seed. It looks the same. It's brown in color. This isn't as boring as it sounds. Most of our parrots eat sunflower seed ad infinitum. They actually very often will choose one particular thing that they eat and eat it all the time. So sunflower seed, let's talk a little, let's talk about fit birds. Fit birds feed much better than overweight or underweight birds. A fully balanced diet will ensure that your birds are kept in optimum weight. Sunflower seed only grows in North America, folks. There are no parrots in North America. It is not a natural food for parrots. We all think this is a perfectly natural food for them to eat. In the wild, parrots don't even see sunflower seeds. They cause vitamin A deficiency. They also have a lot of oils and fat. They cause obese parrots. And obviously, with vitamin deficiencies, birds won't breed well. So I really don't think sunflower seed should be offered to parrots at the extent that it is. The other thing you want to keep in mind is we feed our birds seed 12 months out of the year, 24/7. In the wild, seeds mostly occur in the autumn, at the end of the summer. Fresh foods are all growing in the summer. So in actual fact, in the wild, most birds only really feed on seeds in the autumn and the winter and feed on other things in the summer. We think a seed diet is totally natural. We feed it to them all the time. Again, this is not totally natural. And I'm not saying you should feed your bird pellets. I'm just saying this is why I do. Let's have a look at egg handling. Now in the background there, this is a microscopic picture of an eggshell, the outside of an eggshell. It is full of holes. Those holes go all the way down into the little embryo developing inside. So that also means, and the reason that it has holes is to exchange do a gaseous exchange with the environment during the developing of the chick, and also a fluid exchange, evaporation of fluid or addition of fluid to the chick inside. So that means the bacteria and everything else can also get through those holes and contaminate your chick. Don't handle eggs with your bare hands. Your hands, even when you wash them, are not as clean as you think they are. You could be introducing foreign bacteria like Staphylococcus, which can be a natural pathogen on human hands, can affect the developing embryo inside. Don't wash eggs. When you have a bit of feces on the outside of the egg and you think, oh, I'm going to wash it off, what you actually do is you add water to the feces and make what we call poop soup, and then that poop soup gets sucked into these holes and contaminates the embryo inside. Don't bump or knock eggs. When you have a freshly laid egg, it is one cell that's been fertilized by the sperm, is very delicate and fragile. As the egg develops larger, the chick gets larger, then the eggs are not as susceptible to vibrations and knocks. But keep this in mind. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about later is when we candle an egg, say halfway through incubation, there's no development, we declare it infertile and we throw it away. Most of those eggs, an awful lot of those eggs, are not infertile. They just didn't develop because of some of these things. So we're going to talk a little bit later about how you can tell whether it's actually fertile or just didn't develop because it wasn't handled correctly. Little bit about egg storage. Sorry if the slide is cutting off a bit there. So a couple of things about storing eggs. If you're pulling eggs and storing them until the clutch is complete and then returning them to your hens, do not store eggs longer than 5 to 7 days. That one little cell that's been fertilized will start to perish after 5 to 7 days. The sooner you can get the clutch back, the better. Don't think you can store for an extended period of time. Another thing, you should be turning those eggs while you're waiting for the clutch to become complete. You turn once daily, first clockwise, then counterclockwise. And the reason for this is you have a membrane across there. It's a little bit like an elastic band. It's called the chalaza, and it holds the egg yolk perfectly in the center of the shell so that it isn't dropping to the bottom and adhering to the shell. If you leave it long enough, the chalaza will begin to weaken and the yolk will begin to drop and adhere to the shell. That egg won't develop. So what happens, the hen naturally turns eggs very regularly. What happens when you turn it is you make sure that the chalaza is still holding the egg yolk where it needs to be. If you keep turning clockwise, clockwise, clockwise every single day for 7 days, then what you're going to do is wind that chalaza up like an elastic band to break it. So you have to go clockwise and counterclockwise. And this is important for maintaining the health of those eggs until you can get them back either into the incubator or back to the hen. Ideally, it's recommended you keep these eggs that you're holding until the clutch is complete between 50 and 60 degrees or at room temperature. The problem with room temperature is that that little embryo can begin to develop. So ideally, you want to stop and hold all development until you're ready to incubate the eggs. 50 to 60 degrees will do this. Don't knock or expose eggs to vibrations. If you're transporting eggs, don't put them on the floor of the car and have all the vibrations from the travel affect that little embryo, tiny embryo inside, or that little fertilized egg, as fertilized cell. And storing eggs. Different species require different storing positions. Some require on their side, some require with the pointed or the narrow end down. None of them should ever be placed with an air cell down, because air will naturally try to rise and it will start to push its way up the side of the membrane. If you don't know what that particular species, the best storage technique, then put the eggs on their side. There's very few problems associated with keeping them on their side. Don't put them small end down. Environment. Environment has a big effect on fertility as well. Let's have a look at nests. Nesting material. Sometimes when we have a lot of birds, like myself, it can get a little tiresome to keep throwing nesting material in there. But one of the important things is that most birds, when they do build a nest and nesting material, they will build it in a slight conical shape. And the reason for that is it keeps the eggs together in a little bundle underneath the hen, so they all get incubated equally. If you don't give enough nesting material and the bottom of the basket is flat, the eggs will roll out to the side, and the hen will constantly be trying to draw them into her body, but the outer eggs on the outside edge will not get incubated as well as the inner eggs. Another reason why you might look and go, that egg's infertile. It wasn't infertile, it just, you don't have enough nesting material in there. Type of nest, do your research on your species, really important. Find out what they like. Don't make them nest in something they don't want to nest in. Nest inspections, everybody wants to know what's going on, but you know what, it's not natural for a bird to have somebody checking on what's going on with their eggs and their chicks all the time. The least you can do nest inspections, the better. Give the birds the privacy as much as you can. Light, the distance from the light. I breed canaries is one thing that I breed, and I have full spectrum lighting in my bird room. I've discovered that a lot of the time in a lot of years, the birds that are on the upper shelves of my bird room don't necessarily breed as well as those in the middle or the bottom. So now I put a cover on the top of the cages so they're not exposed to as much intensive light. Most birds don't nest in the very top of a tree where the sun's shining down. They nest in the secluded area. So give them that shelter on top of them as well. Sometimes you'll find the guys at the bottom aren't breeding as well. Move the guys who aren't breeding as well and move them to a different level. If you've got birds outside, they can be very particular whether their nest is pointing northeast, west, or south. Do research on your species. Find out where you should be placing the nest basket. Neighbors, predators. Obviously, you're not going to put a hawk beside nesting pigeons because they're going to be so stressed out, they're not going to do anything. But keep in mind, what's beside your birds? What can they actually see that is making them feel unsafe? Maybe they don't want to see the neighbors at all. Put up visual barriers between your birds if that's the case. Colony species. Flamingos, they won't breed. You need almost a minimum of at least 10 birds before they'll even breed. Things like buffalo weavers, same thing. They breed in a colony. Find out what your minimum numbers are in order to get successful breeding. they feel safe with a certain amount of birds. So let's have a look now at some of this tribal knowledge I talked about. We get a lot of birds that we breed that are migratory. Debbie Eaton is a very successful breeder, and she's one of the people that I asked what she would recommend or what has she found over the years that works well. She has found that red siskins in particular, and I've put in and other migratory birds, that if she moves them to another room for a period of time and then back into the breeding room, it simulates migration. The birds get that feeling of having gone away and come back. If your birds aren't breeding, you have a migratory bird, try it. See if it works for you to increase your fertility. Light is really important. Extended amounts of light stimulate the pineal and pituitary glands, which are in the head of the bird, and it controls the production of hormones. So we increase the daylight to simulate a summer to 12 to 14 hours. I do 14 hours for canaries. This can bring my birds into breeding condition whenever I want. Now, one of the interesting things, and they've done experiments on this, is you can take a blind bird and expose it to increased amounts of light, and it will still come into breeding condition. The reason for this is there's some spongy tissue at the top of a bird's head, also our reptiles, and they actually absorb the amount of light in through that. They don't need it to come in through the eyes. That's how important light length is to birds. And that can still bring them, it stimulates the pituitary and the pineal glands and produces the hormones, bring them into breeding condition. If you leave them on 14 hours of light, 24/7, 12 months out of the year, they will stop responding to it. You have to shut the light back to maybe 8 hours, bring it slowly forward to your 14, and do it again each year in order for it to continue to have an effect. Tropical species, and again, do the research on your species. Tropical species are less responsive to light changes because in the tropics, they have 12 hours of light, 12 hours of night. That doesn't change summer to winter. So they won't actually respond to light changes. But what they do respond to is climate. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So here's some science versus tribal knowledge. Phil Warren, very, very well-known and famous breeder of birds in Britain. And I asked him, what have you found that affects fertility and sex ratios in birds? He has found that putting in a red pygmy bulb in his bird room and leaving it on at night, he said he does it so that the hens can get back to the nest if they come off. But what he's found over the years is it's actually increased the male fertility of his birds. Now, science says that red wavelengths are the most important in the wavelengths that come through the top of the bird's head, and they bring birds into breeding condition. So a red light can increase the concentration of the wavelengths that your birds receive and increase your male fertility. This is a nice example of how tribal knowledge has matched up with science. So again, talking about tropical species, they don't respond as much to the light changes. What they do respond to is climate changes, and that is producing a rainy season or a dry season. This can be done if you've got outside aviaries. You can produce a rainy season with misters, sprinklers. If you're indoors, you can use a humidifier to make the birds think that we're heading into a rainy season. Dry season, you can produce it with a dehumidifier, bring the humidity of your bird room down, increase the heat, make the birds think they're heading into a dry season. Do the research on your species, find out what they need. Debbie Eaton also had a suggestion. She likes to create, and I also do, a winter for my birds. So in the winter, I actually lower my bird room and I'll let it go down to about 48 degrees. And then allow the heat to build back up in the summer. Again, this signals to the bird, I'm down at 8 hours of light, it's getting cold, it's winter. They shut down naturally, and then I increase the light, I increase the temperature, I create a spring and a summer. So Some birds, this is very important to actually bring them into breeding condition. Physical condition affects birds. Wing clipping or pinioning is one of the major problems with infertility in cranes and in parrots. They cannot keep their balance. Let's take a male parrot or large parrot. If they actually are a species that mounts the hen, it's very hard to keep your balance, and you got half a wing on one side and a full wing on the other. So keep this in mind if you're trying to keep your breeding birds as pets as well. Let their wings grow out if you possibly can. Or with cranes, we try not to pinion them because it does affect the ability for the two birds to connect in the way they need to during mating. The other thing is sperm matures overnight in birds. So birds have internal testes, unlike mammals which have external testes. Sperm does not mature well or store well at high temperatures. Birds have a very high body temperature. So how do they produce their sperm? At nighttime, their body temperature drops very slightly, enough for sperm to mature properly. And in the morning, that sperm is at its most numerous and at its most fertile. So if you're coming home from work and putting your male bird with all your hens, you might find you have better fertility of eggs by doing the same thing early in the morning, not when he's used up most of his sperm, it's gone away, it's not at its most fertile. Loose perches, wrong size perches, again, same problem. The birds are trying to grasp a perch. The hen is trying to grasp a perch. There's rocking on them, or it's the wrong size. Here is a diagram of what the correct size perches should look like. This is good. This is halfway around the perch. The bird's got a good grip. This is too small. How's the hen supposed to grab a hold of that properly? This is too large, and this is too small, where the bird is grasping all the way around the perch there. So keep in mind, you should ideally have a whole variety of perch sizes, but if you're just going to go with one size, which a lot of people do, make sure it's the right size, because the hen is not going to be able to grasp properly. Along that line, long toenails. How do you expect the male to keep his balance, or the female to hold the perch when the toenails are too long? Keep your toenails trimmed. I trim at least 3 times a year. Beginning of the breeding season, in the middle of the breeding season, and at the end at least. Keep an eye on toenails because they can affect fertility of eggs too. Excessive feathering around the vent area. I breed Norwich canaries, and they are the roundest, fluffiest, gorgeous, most gorgeous birds you can imagine, but there is so much feather and fluff around the vent area. It's very easy for a tiny sperm sample from the male to get soaked into the feathers instead of going where it should go. So what do? I trim the feathers. I don't pull them out because, first of all, that hurts, but also they'll grow back very rapidly. I actually trim all around the vent of my birds at the beginning of the breeding season to make sure that when they connect properly. Imprinting down the bottom, you can see that cute picture. Those ducks are actually all imprinted on that dog. Imprinting is where a bird learns who he is and what he is at a very young age. Some species are very hardwired, like canaries and finches. Doesn't matter if you ham raise them, they still know who they are. Parrots and waterfowl, whoever raises them is what they think they are. This is also who they're going to go to pick a mate later. So if you have an awful lot of hand-raised parrots are happening out there because they make awesome good pets, they don't make the best breeders. So keep in mind, if you're looking towards the future of your collection, don't imprint too many birds or leave some that are not imprinted. They're raised by their parents. They know who to go to for a mate. Inbreeding. Up here are some of the birds that we've actually produced by inbreeding. I think these ones in the middle are awfully cute. They're actually chickens. Now down here, these are actually wild birds, and they've managed to inbreed to such a degree they've reached these extreme looks. But inbreeding, how does it actually affect fertility? Well, the first thing that it usually affects, and inbreeding is where you get a lot of close relatives breeding with each other. And first thing it affects is it lowers what's called libido, which is sex drive. So you get a lot of birds that just want to sit there and hold hands all summer. That's great, but it doesn't make babies. So inbreeding will lower libido, and it's nature's way of stopping further inbreeding. So the less they want to breed with each other, the less they will breed, the less inbreeding you'll get. It also is known to reduce sperm quality. That means that you get more damaged sperm, more mutated sperm, more sperm that's misformed, and you also get reduced numbers of sperm. Poor health. This results from a reduced immunity to disease that occurs when you inbreed too much, and you end up with a lot of health problems. There's also something called inbreeding avoidance, and that's familiarity with siblings, and this is really interesting. I did a study once on a colony of captive bred Humboldt's penguins, and I wanted to see if they were given a free choice of mates, did they tend to choose a mate that wasn't related to them? And the fact was that they did. Now, how did they know which ones were less related to them than others? It was familiarity. So basically, the birds that they grew up with closest, or they were raised by, they found less attractive than the birds they'd never seen before. So how does that affect us with captive breeding? You now have two wonderful parrots you've bought as babies. You raise them as siblings, and you're expecting them to pair up and breed when they're mature. They might not, because they think they're siblings. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you're better keeping your breeding birds apart while they're being raised, so that when they get together, they think, holy cow, look at that tall, dark, and handsome stranger, not somebody I know. So inbreeding, you need a certain amount of inbreeding in order to produce a standard, say if you're breeding showbirds or these wonderful weird looking things, but keep an eye on how much you're inbreeding. So another thing you can do is you can use artificial insemination to affect to increase your fertility. And here's the reason for this. When the hen is ready to lay or to begin the development of an egg, the ova, which is the one cell that's waiting to be fertilized, gets dropped into the top of the reproductive tract. And that's called the funnel. Important factor is that's only there for 15 minutes, and it's the only time it can be fertilized. After that, the egg white, the egg shell, and everything else is put on. It can no longer be fertilized. So your timing for when your sperm is in the reproductive tract is really crucial. Artificial insemination can enable you to make sure that you hit that 15-minute opportunity for fertilizing an egg. And all of that is in the book on the different species. It's different for each species, that you can actually figure out where that timing is and make sure that the sperm is in the reproductive tract when it needs to be. So this is a good tool to have if you're having breeding problems. So let's have a look now at sex ratios, and that is how many male chicks versus how many female chicks you're getting. These are some of the factors that actually affect what the sex of the chicks that are being hatched out. First of all, we've got to talk a little bit about chromosomes. In mammals or humans, there are two chromosomes that make up whether you're a male or whether you're a female. The females have what's called XX chromosomes. They're both identical. A male has XY. Each one donates one of those chromosomes to make the baby. A female can only ever make female babies because she has no Y to donate. It's called the wild card. The male has a wild card. He has the Y. So in mammals, the male is the one that dictates the sex of the offspring because only he can produce males. The female can only produce hens. Yeah, that was people I was talking about. Okay, let's talk about birds. In birds, it's the opposite. In birds, the male is the XX. That's all he can donate towards the sex of the offspring. The female has the wild card. She has the Y. So in birds, the female is what dictates the sex of the offspring. Keep this in mind as we go through. Sex ratios, again, science shows that female wood duck embryos die at a higher incubation temperature and male embryos don't. Therefore, more males result from higher incubation temperatures. Now let's look at our tribal knowledge. Breeders believe that hens fed on a very rich diet incubate at a hotter temperature. So what does that actually tell us? If that's true, if you're feeding an ultra-rich diet, you're killing your female embryos and you're favoring your males. So, what's your diet? Yeah, again, I like pellets. Pellets are balanced. They're not extra rich. You might be able to reduce the amount of males you're actually producing. Another scientific study in Australia showed that eggs stored at 40 degrees prior to incubation. Again, that's when you're pulling your eggs into a clutch, or you're waiting for the clutch to be complete. Prior to incubation, hatched out more females. Eggs stored at 60 degrees hatched out equal male-female ratios. I said earlier that you should store your eggs between 50 and 60 degrees is what we recommend. Get yourself a wine cooler. If you're not producing the amount of sexes that you want or females that you want, get yourself a wine cooler, store your eggs that you're holding at 40 degrees. See if you get more females than males. Another scientific study that was done, and this one's really cool, that elevations of corticosterone, which is the stress hormone produced by the body, near the time of chromosome development cause female zebra finches to produce more male chicks than female chicks. So what that study proved was that hens that are stressed out at the time they're getting ready to lay produce more male chicks. Now let's have a look at some fascinating tribal knowledge. Again, from this gentleman in Britain, Phil Warren. He said to me that over the years, he's found young males produce more male chicks and unfit older males produce more female chicks. So how does the two tie together? The young male is probably pushing the hen to nest and to breed a lot more than the older guy is. So he's stressing her out, and she's producing more male chicks because of the corticosterone. The unfit older males are spending more time holding hens, and they're not stressing her out, making more female chicks. Take this into consideration when you're doing your pairings if you want to skew the sex ratios of your chicks. Ray Mena, another really good breeder in California, he gave me this tip of tribal knowledge. Here's the science. Science has already shown that long ultraviolet can have an influence on the number of female chicks produced. Robert Black did an experiment, and he wrote a paper about it. He installed a 4-foot black light tube, which changed Gouldian and society finch chick sex ratios from 75%, 90% male to 50-50 sex ratios of males and females. So, if you have a skewed sex ratios, try installing a black light tube in your bird room and see if you can actually affect the sex ratios that are being hatched out. Science, again, shows that sexes that take the longest to reach maturity are often produced at the beginning of the breeding season. Those that take less time to reach maturity are produced at the end of the season. And what this does is it ensures both males and females are ready to breed the following year. So let's have a look at your bird room that you're producing a lot of males. Let's say males take less time than females to begin breeding. Could be you've decided you don't really want to start breeding until March or April or even longer because that just works out for you. Try pulling your breeding season back to maybe January, February. See if you can skew the sex ratios of the chicks, because now the birds will look towards producing more of the sex that takes the longest to reach maturity. This is a good one. This was given to me by Gary Morgan. He told me about this. Another very good breeder. And I'm sorry, we got a little bit of overlap there. Okay, there's something called sorghum seed, and it contains a genetic female hormone. This man here is Dr. N.W. Walker, kept a full dish of sorghum seed in with his zebra finches. In the first year, his finches produced close to 4 female birds for every 1 male bird that was hatched out, just by feeding that seed. Prior to this, the sex ratio was 50-50 male or female. Gary actually told me he was going to try this out with his birds this year. I believe he produces citizens, I'm not sure, parrots, but he was going to do DNA sexing to see what difference it made. So another thing you can look at in your efforts to manipulate the sex ratios of the birds. Let's have a look now at new science, and this is really exciting stuff. This is stuff that my company is now actively involved in and offering as a service. So I talked earlier about not all clear eggs or infertile eggs are actually infertile. So how do you know? How do you know if the eggs that you're throwing away as infertile were fertilized and you don't have a breeding problem, but you actually have an incubation problem? What we do is we take that egg apart and we remove the membrane from the egg yolk itself. Then I stain it with a fluorescent stain, and I use this super duper, very expensive fluorescent microscope, and it makes DNA glow. And I'm able to view the glowing DNA. Only things with DNA will glow. Sperm has DNA. So I'm actually able to see the sperm heads embedded in the yolk membrane. So now I can tell the breeder, you know what, your eggs are fertile, there's something wrong with your incubation, or maybe you're not providing enough nesting material and the eggs are rolling out and not being heated properly. It could be all sorts of reasons, which I've covered in this presentation. Another advantage of this test is I can see bacteria, which also contains DNA. It glows. One breeder had an excessive amount of bacteria inside his eggs. Bacteria kills sperm. So we put his birds on a long-term treatment of antibiotics, and his fertility rate went up. It was actually the bacteria that was infecting his birds that were causing the infertility problems. So this is a service that I offer. You can find it on the website under laboratory services. Now this is unbelievably awesome. This is a project that I'm working on with the San Diego Zoo Institute, and this is where we take the testes and ovaries, but I'm just going to talk initially about the testes from a dead bird. So let's say your hyacinth macaw has dropped dead on you, your male, and you desperately want to at least save some sort of sperm from that bird because he's really important, or in the case of the Institute, it's an endangered species. We can now take that testicle, chop it up into tiny weeny little pieces, and open up a developing chicken egg that we have in the incubator. We score one of those blood vessels I was talking about earlier. We score one of those very slightly just to make it bleed a little tiny bit, and we put the piece of testicle in there. Within 3 days, the blood vessels from the embryo encapsulate the testicle and invasculate it again. They bring it back to life. They give it a blood supply. Now we need to get that live piece of testicle out of there because the developing chicken embryo is going to grow and push it out. And we actually implant it onto the back of a zebra finch or a chicken. One of the differences between birds and mammals, mammal sperm does not mature in the testicles. It matures in the vas deferens, which is the tube that comes down and goes to the prostrate gland. Bird sperm matures completely inside the testicle. So you can actually put a syringe in the testicle and pull out live sperm that you can use for artificial insemination. So now you have a finch or a chicken, and on its back you actually have a live and grown testicle from a California condor or something equally rare, or your hyacinth macaw, and you can extract semen from that testicle that's on the back and artificially inseminate the hen. That's one of the things we're working on. The other is you can take, and the other thing we found is you don't even now have to wait until the bird is dead. You can actually do a biopsy of a live testicle in a bird that's perfectly healthy and do exactly the same thing. You can grow a testicle in the back of another bird. It's weird, it's Frankensteinish, but you know what? It could be incredibly valuable. For the Institute, the San Diego Institute, they look at it for endangered species. What I'm looking at is a service that we can now offer to serious bird breeders that have some very rare collections of birds that want to preserve the reproductive power of those birds long after they're gone. So another thing that is being done is you can actually take stem cells from the testicles or ovaries. Stem cells are pre-programmed to know what they are. They will go to where they need to go in the body to develop into exactly what they're going to be. That's what makes a stem cell. So you take the stem cell from the testes and you actually dye all the cells, and a cell sorter will take the stem cells and separate them off. You can inject them into a day-old chicken, and it has to be a male if you're taking testicle stem cells, and that stem cell will find its way through the bloodstream or wherever you want to put it in. It will find its way to the testicles, and it will grow into a testes of a California condor or whatever bird you want. Now that bird, that male rooster, will grow up with two testicles, one of his own and one of a rare bird that he's not even related to. You use artificial insemination to remove the sperm, and you inseminate the sperm into the hen of the rare species. The chicken sperm obviously will have no effect, but the rare species sperm will be able to fertilize the egg. Now look at it, you can do the same thing with ovaries. So now you take a stem cells from the ovaries of a bird, put it in a day-old chicken that's a girl. Stem cell will go to her ovaries and grow an extra ovary that belongs to another species. So now put those two Frankensteins together, and you can take the mixed sperm, put it in the hen that has two ovaries, and the eggs will be fertilized, an egg will be laid. You won't know whether it's a hyacinth macaw or a chicken, and you'll find out when it hatches out.
Wow.
So this is incredible science. Yes, it's a little weird and freakish, but it has enormous opportunity to save birds or save breeding plans when things are going wrong. So that concludes my presentation. You can reach us tomorrow. I'll be at the Bird Mart in the Cage Bird Show, and also on Saturday, or you can reach us online. I will be posting this presentation on my website in November, so you'll be able to see it there as well. Any questions?
Amazing. Early in your presentation, you talked about vitamins. Can you give too many vitamins? Too much vitamin C? Too much vitamin E?
Vitamins come in two forms, and the question was, in case anybody out there on YouTube didn't hear it, can you give too much vitamins when you're supplementing your birds? There's two types of vitamins. There's water-soluble and oil-based vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C, whatever your body doesn't use, it will excrete. It will go through and get pushed out. Oil-based vitamins like vitamin E and vitamin A, you can overdose it because that does get stored in the body. So again, be careful with your supplementations. There is such thing as too much, and again, make sure that your diet is balanced. Now, as I said earlier, I feed a pellet diet. You're not supposed to supplement that with anything. It is already balanced. So if your diet is balanced in that way, don't add anything. It's already there. If you're feeding a seed and produce diet, then use one type of supplement during the breeding season, say the A Viagra. During the non-breeding season, I have another product have a Vita Gold or have a Vita Plus, just use that. Don't do a whole bunch of different stuff because yes, you can end up with too much of a good thing. Anybody else? Yes.
So when you have a vitamin D deficiency in humans, you're often encouraged to take vitamin K. So is that similar in birds? If you've got calcium deficiencies and you're bumping up the vitamin D, would you also want some vitamin K in that to help them absorb it?
Okay, the question is in humans, when you have a vitamin D deficiency, that they often use vitamin K to boost up the D in the body. Now, I have not heard of this with birds. Vitamin K is usually associated with blood clotting, and they'll use it if, in cases of warfarin poisoning and stuff like that. I haven't heard of vitamin K being in there as any sort of catalyst for vitamin E, but doesn't mean it's not the case. I just don't know of it. Most of the time, vitamin E is associated with the amino acids in our supplements, but vitamin K, all the vitamins need to be there in the right balance for birds. And that's why we have human vitamins, bird vitamins, dog vitamins. So I can't particularly talk on that, but I can say it reinforces what we're saying earlier. Use something that's bird specific, because your nutritionalists that have gone to school for longer than I have all that worked out. Hopefully that answers your question.
I know it's missed in humans a lot.
Yeah.
People don't associate that, and I know personally.
Yeah, exactly.
It boosted my vitamin D.
Uh-huh.
I had bones that were trying to heal. And
Okay.
It actually did boost my vitamin D, which also assists in
Interesting.
calcium and bones
Calcium
and
deficiencies and stuff. Yes, as I say, I only know of vitamin K to be used in large quantities for blood clotting or internal bleeding of any sort. Any other questions? Yes.
Andrea, do you ever go to different clubs and do a presentation for them?
Absolutely. I will travel all over the place to do presentations. I'm actually off to Lebanon this year in the New Year to do a presentation there. So wherever you guys can get me to, I will come and talk for you. That's no problem. I love to do my presentations and talk with people.
We just need to get you there.
Just get me there.
Take care of you.
That's right. Take care of me. The other thing that I do is I try to get these posted on the website particularly for international bird breeders, so that they can also get the information that's here in the presentations.
Can we take these and show them at our club?
Absolutely. If you go on my website, which is taxonics.com, then you'll see an area there called workshops. You can take them into your clubs and show them, and obviously it's not quite as interactive as a live presentation, but at least you can use it for your meetings as well. All right, that's going to have to conclude this, and we've got to move on to the next presentation. If anyone has any further questions, I'm going to be around for the next 3 days. If